and welcome back to another Modern Firm podcast. Darren, enough travel for you lately?
Yes.
Maybe too much?
Yeah. I don't think I planned well.
Yeah, I've noticed that.
I'm usually better at this than that.
Every time I look at your calendar, you're flying somewhere.
Yeah. I just saw where United upgraded me to their. I climbed 2 levels on United this year, which is not ever my goal.
No.
I kind of want to be at the lowest level.
I remember when I wanted to attain status.
I used to aspire to that.
Now it means that I have a life I don't want.
Right. Bad choices.
That's right.
I've been everywhere.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're here today. We've got an episode today that's a little bit different. Wanted to kind of introduce our guest today. Who I just really like as a human being. It's nice to meet somebody in technology that you just click with. Davis Bell from Canopy, CEO of Canopy. And I know you and Davis have been friends now for a year or so, maybe a little more.
Yeah.
So you've got a really good rapport, and we wanted our audience to get to hear from him. He's a really busy guy. So we did an interview beforehand, but I want to kind of set that up so we can kind of get the audience. Davis is out in Salt Lake and doing some incredible stuff with Canopy. Huge team, honestly, 70 people, I think he said, working in cloud development and just doing some really good things.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm super excited to have Davis, the interview with Davis. Right now we're at this, I think it's kind of an inflection point where, artificial intelligence is certainly all the rage. But I think it's super real.
Yeah.
This is not just,
it feels here.
Yeah. It's not just, something that we're talking about that's not going to turn into anything. This is already turning into something. And this something is going to impact the way accounting firms work. Especially, I think in 2024 and certainly beyond. And with that, picking the right tech stack has now become more important than ever, John. I think that if you don't select the right technologies, you may miss it.
Yeah.
Right? Or if you select too many technologies that don't integrate, you may miss it. So when you start thinking about selecting the right technologies, I think finding partners that have leadership like Davis Bell is super important. Who leads these companies is really, really important.
Yeah, that's what we're hoping to do with this podcast too, is just get people to introduce to thought leaders and technology leaders inside of the market. Darren, that's one thing you always bring is these connections. And I don't know how you keep these connections going, but
into them.
you stumble into these amazing connections. And so we want people to get a chance to hear from somebody who's really leading what we call firm management on this podcast.
Yeah, you know what? Davis used to be at a company called Instructure, and Instructure, I think is a Salt Lake City-based company, and they're big in the university space, the education space. They have a product called Canvas. I know Indiana University runs on Canvas. We used Canvas for a long time in our education components in Rootworks, and it's just a fantastic product. Anyway, Davis has long history of product development. He came over as CEO. I'm going to go out on a limb here. I think 4 or 5 years ago, of Canopy, and they really doubled down on developing a world-class practice management, or what they would like to say is firm management solution, which is bigger than just practice management. I mean, I think historically we think of practice management as time and billing and projects and tasks and things like that. Firm management's much broader than that. It starts thinking about the client when they're not a client before they come in. Yeah. And it starts thinking about reporting on everything that's happened all the way through that process. It's really the management of your entire firm.
Yeah, I'm excited to get our audience a chance to meet Davis. And just wherever you are, sit back, listen to this conversation today. Think about the decisions that you're going to have to make in your firm in the coming months. And we'll come back and debrief a little bit afterwards. Check out this interview with Darren and our new friend, Davis Bell, CEO of Canopy.
All right, guys, I am now with Davis Bell, good friend of mine and CEO of Canopy. So welcome, Davis.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Great to see you, Darren.
Great to see you again. It's better online as opposed to me flying to Utah.
Yeah.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
Sure. You did miss, we've got a beautiful snowstorm you missed. But
really?
Yeah.
Is it that time really already? I mean,
it's getting there. Yeah. I've got a nice little dusting on the mountains around us. So getting ready for ski season.
Before we jump into it, Davis, do you care just to give our audience a little bit of a intro to yourself other than CEO of Canopy?
Sure. Yeah. So I've been at Canopy for 4 years. And prior to Canopy, I've been working in what we call the vertical SaaS industry. So SaaS is a term you're going to be familiar with. Vertical is SaaS applications that are focused on a particular vertical or industry. So I've worked in the education industry, higher ed, and K-12, the travel industry, and always kind of figuring out systems of record, right? So it's a pretty specialized niche, but I enjoy it because you can go in, you can understand a business or a customer, figure out exactly what they need to serve their customer, and then give it to them in the form of software that they use to run their practice, business, school, whatever it may be. So been doing that for a long time now.
So Davis, Canopy's initial beginnings was back a while ago, and it seems to me like you guys started out doing some tax stuff, and they brought you in and shifted the focus to more firm management.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's accurate. I mean, the company was started in 2014, and the first product was in the tax resolution space. We still have that product today.
Yeah.
And then a lot of the vision and the energy, the excitement was around building a tax product, a tax preparation, tax compliance. And obviously no one's done that in a very long time. And I think there are reasons why. It's a big product to build. And I think, over time, the focus shifted towards where we are today, which is kind of when I came in. I've been here now for 4 years, and our focus since I came on was we've kept our tax resolution product, but we sort of shut down development on the tax product and decided to go all in on firm management and put all of our resources, all of our focus and efforts on that, and that's gone great. So that's really kind of how we ended up where we are today.
So I've been out to your office a few times, and the one thing I noticed is what an incredible team you have. So congratulations for that. But I mean, you guys have a sizable team. You guys are putting a lot of energy and focus into firm management. Can you kind of talk to me just a little bit about this concept? I tried to build a few software applications in the past, and I would call it not enterprise. So kind of the difference between building an enterprise solution, something that can scale and that can handle more versus, just coding something up and running with it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you asked, because a lot of people who I think aren't in software, it's easy to misunderstand a little bit, right? Like you can go on a website of a software application A and website of software application B, and there's always a checklist, right, of big feature families or modules or whatever you call them. And you look and, there's 9 things checked here and there's 9 things checked there. And you're like, oh, great. Well, these are completely comparable. And I think, there's a couple of different elements of that and ways to think about it. So number one, there's sort of breadth and depth within, let's say document management. Let's just take that as an example. Well, you can say we have document management, they have document management, but then underneath that, there's a million little sub features, right? And we've learned that as we've gotten into larger firms, that the level of complexity sort of scales exponentially, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like every time you add a slightly larger firm that has that many more clients that are that much more complex, and the team's that much bigger at the firm, the needs from the software are infinitely more complex. And so that one little checkbox doesn't really tell the story.
Yeah.
I think the second piece of it is there's all kinds of things that are behind features that people who aren't in software don't think about. There's security, there's stability, there's what we call sort of toast rate or error rate, right? How many of your users are going to experience a bug? And so the security reliability elements of this are enormous. And especially in the seasonal business, right? I mean, our app gets, as you can imagine, the usage it gets hit with in the run up to a deadline is enormous, right? And you have to have really sophisticated systems and people who are watching that and building an application that scales well to that. So scalability, security, reliability, in addition to the fact that under every feature is hundreds, thousands of sub features is important to note. And I would say that, one thing that we've been able to do is fund a company through investment capital that's enabled us to build that, right? So we have a 70-person cloud development team, which, I don't know exactly, but if you went around and asked every company in the industry, there's not going to be a lot of companies that are investing at that level, even much larger companies. And that's simply because of all the reasons we've talked about. We've always known what we wanted to build and where we're going. We've been able to fund it with investor capital from investors who believed in the opportunity.
I think one of the biggest opportunities right now in the tax and accounting space is to help accounting firms with the whole firm management side of their business. It feels like we've been somewhat stagnant in that space for quite a while. There's been a lot of point solutions, solutions that do a single task or maybe a couple of tasks that have popped up. And we can talk about point solutions here in a second, but to me, that's made life more complicated in a lot of ways for accounting firms. And so I think having a business that is has the amount of resources that you guys have had, putting the amount of investment into solving this problem, I think that's why firms ought to be paying attention to what's going on. But I think what you said is really crucial. The whole concept of looking at a spreadsheet with all the different practice management solutions on there and looking at a feature set and having checkboxes, they're not all the same. And I think I want to make sure that I reiterate what you said, because I completely agree that they're not all the same. And you've got to get under the hood. And when you get under the hood, you start looking out and saying, okay, this thing is more enterprise, and how are they focused on the future? What's the future going to look like based on their enterprise infrastructure? Does that make any sense? Or?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. And I think, you mentioned a key point in terms of, the evolution of this firm management category, which is, you can sort of come at this from one of two angles. You can pick a module, one specific thing, workflow or time of billing, and say, let's build that, and let's build a good version of that. And then as people adopt it and we get bigger and we get more revenue, we can then move over and build the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, right? So it's sort of this, sideways way of doing things. And, that's the easier way in the sense of, hey, I start small and then I bite off, more as I can chew it. And the challenge with that, though, is that you're going to be usually good at the one thing you started at, and it's going to be really hard to build comparably good things that attach to that. And the other problem is when you only have the one thing or the other thing, there's 5 other things that the firm needs, and then they have to figure out how to address those needs and stitch it together with what you provided them. Now, from a CEO perspective, I understand why people are taking that approach and have taken that approach, because it's really, really challenging to go and get the capital, to get the people to build the whole thing from the ground up. And we had a really hard conversation about that in 2019 when I started, where I just, with high conviction, said, we got to build this thing together, all of it together from the ground up, and we'll just enhance all of it together. And, everyone around the table was like, oof, are you sure? Not a lot of companies do
Big
that.
Big lift.
Yeah, it's a huge lift, right? You're heaving up sort of 5 products that are single products in their own right together. And it's really hard, and it takes a long time, and it takes a lot of money and people. But I felt really high conviction that we needed to do that, because I didn't want to have, at the end of the day, that situation where I built, I built document management, or I built workflow, and then I got to go build the other stuff, but it takes a long time, and only doing a good job here, and I'm making customers figure out the other stuff while I'm, kind of filling the remaining gap. So it's a conundrum you face as you're building a software company, and I have a lot of empathy for people who've taken a different approach. But I think for a customer, it's the better approach, right? To just walk in and have that thing that was built together.
The other thing I noticed when talking to firms, they may say, well, I took a look at, Canopy 2.5 years ago, and I didn't love the way they did reporting. Yeah, that was 2.5 years ago. Things change, right? I mean, it's as you're building this stack, you're constantly improving in different areas, and you're getting feedback from customers, and you're saying, oh, okay, the next big investment is we need to report on every field in here. So, if you looked at something 2.5 years ago, or a year and a half ago, or maybe even 6 months ago, these products products change, right?
Yeah, well, they should. They should. And whether they do or not is a function, I think, of two things generally. The first is the resources of the company, and the second is just the culture of the company, right? Like some companies just culturally don't have that mentality of constant iteration and improvement. But I think the more maybe important thing is the resources, right? Like, which is why I think the sophisticated software buyer pokes around on this stuff and says, well, tell me about your team. How many of them are there? Where are they based? How do they decide what to build? And then show me the track record. Show me the release schedule for the last 24 months. And so I totally get why people, look at something 2 years ago. Time flies. It doesn't even feel like 2 years ago. And you're like, I looked at it. But I think, if you were candidly, I have a hard time keeping up with what we're doing, honestly. Like I'll go into, our CPO, Chief Product Officer's office and say, hey, I feel like we need to be doing this. And he'll say, like, oh yeah, we shipped that, 3 weeks ago. and mind blowing, but that's just the speed of the iteration is really high. And that's, again, cultural for us, but I think, again, a function of their resources, right? Like they're US based, they're cloud native folks, they're incredible engineers, product people, designers, QA folks. And that's what enables the momentum and the cycle, which is pretty unique, I think, in the industry.
So the things that are a part of Canopy today, I'll name my list. Tell me what I'm missing. So client portal, or place for the client to interact with the firm, is there with all kinds of different features, whether it's uploading documents or making payments or looking at invoices, client communication, all that stuff is in that portal. Then you have, inside the firm, you have workflow, you have time and billing, you have documents. And then you have, the reporting capabilities that come off of all of that. What am I missing that's in there today?
I mean, that's a pretty good list, other than what we just shipped. To our earlier point of shipping stuff quickly, we've now released Canopy engagements, which, kind of enables you to start really early in the prospect lifecycle, right? So our little motto here is from proposal to payment. And so we want to provide everything in between, from proposal to payment, everything in between. So I think we're now at the point where we can honestly look people in the eye, and for sophisticated firms to say we do that, right? If you start a prospect, send them a proposal, have them sign an engagement letter, pushes them into the client portal, CRM, and then ingest documents, organize them, annotate them, and then figure out what you got to do for them. Do that all through workflow, be tracking the amount of time that you're spending, send them an invoice, take payment, do that all through Canopy. So you're never done in software. It's never perfect, but we can now say that we own all of that piece, which I think, one way to think about it, we want people to be, there's tax software, right? And there's bookkeeping and there's payroll. We're not that. You're not going to come into Canopy and run payroll or do taxes or keep your books. But everything else you need to do your job, to run your firm, to manage your employees, the work, customers, should be done on Canopy. And we're now at the point where you can do that.
I think the thing that's powerful about that, Davis, is the having all that information in a cohesive platform, as we now, are really on the precipice, if not in AI, and all the information that lives underneath the hood there. So there's data everywhere there, right? So now all of a sudden you guys can start leveraging AI to surface more and more information in all kinds of different ways, whether it's information about things that you want to know about the client, to the workflow, to how well your staff is producing, to, what are your clients not buying from you? All this stuff can be mined and surfaced through some level of artificial intelligence, and then make the workflow all the way out to engagement with the client. Like, I'll take an example because it's easiest for me to say, we have this product that's not being sold to this client, all the way to an email being sent out to them without the firm having much, if any, friction in that process. Is that a fair assessment?
100%. Yeah, I mean, I think, man, AI, we can talk the whole time about AI, and maybe we should, but I think one key point to raise about AI is AI needs context, right? And that's why if you've done any research, you'll hear about models that are being trained, right? And so it's only useful with context. And so the what we have in Canopy with this system of record for your whole firm and your business and your customers is all that context, right? So when you apply automation against context, you get what you're talking about, which formerly, if you were a really proactive firm and you were really aggressive, you might have had your Monday staff meeting and said, okay, how do we make more money? Well, we're probably not selling, every service to every customer, right? And everyone would kind of know that. But then there'd be this conversation about like, well, okay, how do we figure out who's buying what? And someone, probably, an admin of some kind, would get tagged with the job. Okay, go through everything and figure out, come give us a list, right? And then once we have the list by client of who's buying what, then there would be this process whereby you would reach out, right? And maybe each partner gets a sheaf of names, and picks up the phone or sends an email. And so I think that, AI would be able to do both of those things. You're going to prompt it a little bit, but it's like, hey, pull me a list of everybody, what services everybody's buying from us. And then, from there, the thing, because you might be able to do that in some reporting and certain tools, but the really cool thing, to your point, would be where you can then say, well, then send this email to everybody, and help me craft it, by the way, and then tag me when you get a response, or here's the stock response, right? Just set up a time. Yeah. And so then I just show up to a meeting that I haven't had to do all that much legwork, and then I can provide that human element, right?
It feels like, Canopy is in a really good spot right now, based on my analysis of the application. I think some of the challenges that a lot of firms are dealing with is getting off of starting to look at a tool like Canopy that I would call it a well-rounded solution that does all your firm management, but trying to think about how do they get off of some of the point solutions that they're on. And I'm not going to call any solutions out by name here, but if you're using a tool that does a single thing, help somebody make a payment to you, help somebody sign a proposal for you, helps a client to communicate with you or document share with you. I mean, those are all single task sort of things that are point solutions that I think, I don't know if it was you or Shane said it when I was out in Salt Lake City last time, but you said those are companies that become product features. And I think that's just so interesting that companies over the last 10 or 15 years have developed as a result of a need in the market. I need to get a proposal signed. And now those companies are becoming product features in a tool like Canopy. Is that kind of how you see that?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it sort of goes back to my earlier point where I understand why companies have taken that approach, which is, hey, it's me and a couple of people and we've all quit our jobs and we don't have a lot of time to get this thing out. So we're we're going to just focus on proposals, right?
Yeah.
It's a relatively simple thing. We're going to cook it up. We're going to do a good job, and then we're going to push it out in the market. Makes sense, right? Except for the customer. It makes sense for the company, but less so for the customer, who then is staring at all these different logins, data that's living in separate instances that doesn't talk to each other, different support lines, and then it's more expensive also, right? Like it's always going to be more expensive to buy, solution by solution. So absolutely, I think you're right though, that those are becoming features within, systems of record, right? And I think the other key thing to point out to our earlier conversation about AI is AI, you're going to want the AI to have as much context as possible. So you're not going to want one AI-enabled proposals application that can just talk to you about proposals, right? You're going to want an AI application that can talk to you about the entire client lifecycle and everything you've ever done for them. So yeah, I think, and the other thing that I think is really interesting, and from a company perspective, you'll notice companies that just ship a single application almost always leave the accounting vertical and focus on multiple verticals.
Mm-hmm. Because that's the only way they can really grow it feels like it's the way they grow. Yeah,
exactly. So they're looking around saying, we just have this one product. If we want to grow, we got to sell this to not just accounting firms, but law firms and engineering firms and accounting or architecture firms, consulting firms. And then what happens then? Well, those firms all want different things, right? So they stop working on what the accounting firms need, and then they build a product that gets messy, and you're clicking around and you're like, I'm an accountant. Like, why is there something about a contingency fee here? That's a personal injury law firm thing, right?
Right.
And so you'll see that's what happens over time, is these tools actually become less useful and less focused because they start diluting the focus on other verticals too. So that's another challenge, I think, with these discrete tools.
So Canopy's in a good spot right now. As you look out to 2024, what do you see? What's next for you guys?
Yeah. Well, I would say a couple of things. Then by far the biggest theme is going to be AI. We've built, I believe, the leading end-to-end cloud-based, sort of firm-wide operating system for management tool. We now are being given these tools, and they're evolving very, very quickly, that will do what you're talking about, right? That will automate, that will make you smarter, that will help you provide a better service with the same amount of work, but a much better service to your customers, and then to enable you and your staff to focus on things that humans are better at, right? The reality of it is, we've had humans doing things that are pretty menial and pretty mundane, and they're not, they can do them, but they're not fulfilling and they're not value add.
Or not even doing them at all because there's too much friction in doing them, like figuring out who's not buying a service from you or something.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So I think we want to take this platform we built with all the context in it, and then automate away the menial, mindless stuff. I mean, that's I think theme number one. I mean, theme number two is we shipped a lot of stuff this year, insights, engagements. And to my earlier point of like, it's not a checklist. It's not just saying you have engagements or you have document management. There's a lot of breadth and depth that we need to be continually improving upon. And so I think it's really focusing on a couple of things there that we acknowledge are like, hey, this is fine. It gets the job done, but it's not a delightful, mind-blowing experience. I think that's sort of theme number two.
So one is AI, two is going deeper in some of the enhancements you've done in 2023. Yep. As you look out to 2025, is it even possible to look out that far right now? I mean, I think where do we start getting in 25?
Yeah, I think it's kind of like that Mike Tyson line about everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. I think you always have a plan for the out years, but it's gonna. You also know it's going to change. But I think there's really interesting opportunities. I think that you and I have chatted about some of them around moving things just a little further around, integrating with a firm website so that, you're a little closer to the prospect experience and the website And then there's, there are interesting things around scheduling as an example. So those are things that, we look at, but whether we get there or not in 25 is
I'm still going to put a plug in for my soft data. All the data doesn't live anywhere. So
remind me what that one is.
Like if a client has a buy-sell agreement, it's funded, all those questions that, the portal's the obvious place to get those questions answered.
Yep.
I think that helps a firm become smarter. So again, the data to me should live in the practice management tool.
Yep.
But how you collect that, I think becomes, the challenge. Today it lives in people's heads. So,
well, but that's a great point again about AI, right? Like AI can't do anything with data that's in people's heads.
Right.
And so you've got to get that data in a database somewhere and then apply AI against it. So we actually love that idea and talk about it. And it's sort of on the would love to do list.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, I really appreciate you taking some time today, Davis. My personal perspective right now is that accounting firms are, I don't know when this podcast is going to be released, but, we're at the end of 23, beginning of 24. And I think firms are on the precipice of where they, AI is starting to become a thing. We're starting to see, some things rumble up in the tax space and payroll, I'm sure, is going to start leveraging some AI and, QuickBooks Online starting to leverage some AI. But I think firms, Davis, are on this precipice of needing to figure out this tech stack. I think it's a May 1st, 2024 absolutely must do. I think some of the goals are, how do you minimize the number of tools that you're using inside of a firm? And where the real bloat is right now is around firm management. I mean, people have so many different tools over there that don't talk to each other. So I think 24 ought to be a really good year for you guys. I think the solution's right there and you guys are right there and the firm's need is right there. So I'm just going to put a plug in that I think firms need to be really paying attention to this for post busy season 24.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it. I mean, that's certainly how I feel. And I think, the one element of this that I think a lot of people know that I think where they get hung up is the change management piece.
Yeah.
Right. And we've invested a lot. I mean, candidly, that was something that I think we underinvested in, just appreciating how much work goes into this per firm and how much anxiety there is around it. So I think, giving us a chance to walk people through that, I think is really helpful to just help them understand that we're right there with them. And we're May 1st sounds like a long time away. It's not, obviously. And, we've actually, as we've, begin to serve these larger and larger firms, they're now coming to us in the summer and fall and saying, hey, let's get going. This has got to be going, really in January. So we've had a great we were having a phenomenal November just for people that are like, all right, this is kind of my last chance to get it going.
Yeah. I think there's going to be other changes that firms are going to be thinking about in 24 as well. Whether it's, how they do tax returns to how they run their practice. So I'm super excited about 24. I do think change management is always a challenge for firms. But if you have somebody sort of holding your hand and walking you through it, that's somebody that's been through it before, it's not so bad.
Yeah.
Doing nothing, I think, is a really big challenge right now.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's always hard, right? Any change is hard, but this is one that's never as bad as people think it's going to be.
Yeah. No, I agree. Davis, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks, Darren.
Have a good one.
You too.
Man, what a smart guy and a fun interview. He's a good hang too.
Yeah.
Just good people out there at Canopy.
Yeah, fantastic.
So, Darren, one of the things you said that, and you guys got into a lot of things in that conversation, and we don't need to debrief all of it, but I want to talk just a little bit about how these pieces of software are reviewed and what it looks like to read these things or to hear somebody talk about a piece of software, and then like, what does that mean to my firm really?
Well, I mean, I don't know how you go about picking software, but oftentimes, I look at reviews.
Yeah.
And, there's people who review practice management software, in this space. And I guess what I want to make sure that our listeners are really thinking about, this is not about looking at a software and looking at a set of columns as to the functionality of that software and trying to find the one that checks the most boxes. Just because you check a box in the software or that it has this functionality doesn't mean that it does it well.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that the software is built at an enterprise level, which Davis and I talked about. There's a lot missing in just a review.
Yeah.
So you have to dig deeper to understand, the infrastructure of these technology solutions. The functionality is super important, but also where these software companies are going, and are you willing to bet the next 5 to 10 years on this solution and this solution leadership getting it right?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's why I love doing these interviews, because you start to meet the people behind the products and get their philosophies, understand where they're going. And I think Davis is a good bet when it comes to that.
Yeah, the whole team that he has put together,
Yeah.
From their chief product officer, Shane, to their business development, Bryce. I mean, they just have a good team who work well together and who are trying to solve problems.
Yeah.
Probably, I don't know, a year or so ago, John, I, met with Shane, their chief product officer, and I gave him a series of improvements I felt that they really needed to make to be, a top player or the top player in the industry. I've watched them tick them off every cycle. So that's encouraging to me to see a company that's paying attention, listening to their customers, listening to thought leaders, and making changes.
It absolutely is. I was thinking about while I was listening to the interview back that we see symptoms of people having this unintentional business model and firm, and even the way they pick their technologies. If too much chaos in the firm, they have these symptoms of a non-intentional firm. And one of them, when it comes to technology, is this, you use the word bloat, which I think is a really, it's kind of a gross word. But it's very indicative, I think, of a firm that just keeps going, well, there's another feature I need, another point solution that I'll pull into my ecosystem. And that's more passwords for my staff. And that's more vulnerabilities for my cybersecurity and all of those things. And I really love the conversation today about being intentional and trying to eliminate some of that.
Well, I mean, I think we've gone through a period, you've heard me talk about this a little bit before in sessions, John, but we've gone through a period where practice management was not evolving fast enough.
Yeah.
And so all these point solutions, sort of came into being.
Band-Aids.
And we wanted, firms wanted some of the functionality.
Yeah.
And that's led to software bloat. I mean, people have 25, 30 solutions, trying to solve their problems. What we see is this coming back together, especially on the firm management side, starting, a lot of these things, these companies that were created to solve a particular niche solution is now becoming a feature in a more well-rounded solution, like a Canopy.
Yeah. I think we kicked off this whole podcast series with our SMART series, the pillars that we use to talk about SMART, and the word SMART just meaning intentional. And
we just couldn't spell that.
Well, yeah, right, exactly. We thought about using acronyms for SMART and all of that, but really what we mean is just be intentional about this. And so what we're trying to do is just bring this clarity, this sense of like a deep breath. And when I hear you and Davis talk today, I just thought what it must feel like to think, all right, I could get rid of this, and I could simplify.
Yeah.
And I really think that's what we're trying to bring, more simplicity into our firms.
I think the thing I would leave our listeners with is data is going to be king.
Yeah.
As we move into an AI world, AI relies on data to be effective. How you set up your data structures inside of your firm, the tools that you use to set up those data structures is going to be critical. So getting the right solutions and limiting those solutions so that the data is accessible, so that we get the best information from artificial intelligence we can as we move our firms forward.
Awesome. Well, Darren, I thought you did a great job with that interview.
Oh,
you're going to keep getting better. I hope you liked, as a listener today, you like what you heard. We're going to intersperse those kinds of interviews with thought leaders. You got friends all over the business, Darren, and we're going to bring them in as we can throughout this whole podcast series. So,
yeah, be fun.
Hey, thanks for listening today to the Modern Firm Podcast. We'll see you next time.